Right at the Campus Martius Museum, where I've been volunteering as a volunteer tour guide. And we talked about the history of Rufus Putnam, about the Masonic Lodge. And I just want to go over that again, talk about it some more, spend a little bit more time than just a quick 10 minutes, because trying to rush through that much information like I did, and then trying to use the camera from my phone, which isn't the best quality camera. Maybe some people didn't get it. We live in an entertainment age where people want to be entertained more than learn. So if you don't have top quality everything, sometimes people just tune you off before they really listen to what you're actually saying, even if it would perhaps interest them in some way. So I want to, now that you can see me clearly, you can see on the left here, I'll even minimize. So we're sharing screen here. I'll minimize me so you can see this a little better, hopefully. And we're going to talk a little bit about that history again, and about why Hugh could actually, which is, this is the reason I made this video, is because Hugh Squier could actually be the president of the United States. Okay. His family history is Jackson, Thomas Jefferson, uh, is related to admirals like Admiral Byrd in the military, famous inventors like Fuller, who we're going to talk about again here. So it's no wonder that he's been told throughout his life, it, some of his wives believe that their descendants could possibly become presidents someday by marrying into his family. So, and that's the truth, because he comes from a long line, and it goes back to the history of the founding of Ohio and the Northwest Territory, as well as the foundation of the country itself, which are interrelated, interconnected, and occurred through the efforts of the same people living at that time. Famous names that we've all heard, like George Washington and Lafayette, but other names that you might not have heard, especially if you're not native to Ohio. However, he was intrinsic to winning the Revolutionary War. Names like Rufus Putnam. Now, I have the privilege of living near Marietta, Ohio, which is the first city in the Northwest Territory, the first settlement made by the Ohio Company of Associates, founded by Rufus Putnam, Manassas Cutler, and a few others. And so let's talk about this for a minute. So look here, let's read this. Now we're gonna go back in time. This is the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, awarded British sovereignty over the whole of Nova Scotia, including parts previously claimed by France. So this is okay. We're talking just before the French and Indian War, and then Le Loutre's War, and at the time, so you had the British commander, who was Cornwallis, and under him was Horatio Gates. And like I mentioned in that last video, the Gates family literally goes back to Plymouth. So we got a lot of conspiracy people out there who are chomping at the bit to fight the Gates family. Well, I'm not saying that I agree with everything the Gates family's done. I mean, there's pictures just like with Clinton and with Trump. There's also pictures of the Gates family with Epstein. So, did his wife divorce him because he was hanging out with Epstein? Maybe. So, you have a case that maybe he's up to no good, but the conspiracy theories that he's creating nanobots activated by 5G towers and all this nonsense is just complete baloney. This is a famous family that's been with us and has fought in basically every war on America's side since the beginning. But before we had uh, America's war, before we were fighting against the British, we were fighting with the British against the French, right? So Horatio Gates and was serving under Cornwallis during this war. Now, also present was the 47th Regiment of Foot. Now, this is a pretty famous regiment, military regiment, battalion, I guess. Not wonderful at military terms. I didn't serve in the military, so if I use the wrong word, just overlook the details. But I use the wrong military words, but here the 47th Regiment of Foot was pretty famous for fighting big battles for hundreds of years, okay, and would continue after the Revolutionary War to be a military force that's well known in Britain. But that number 47 is what sticks out, and we're gonna think about that for a minute. Now, so in 1775, the 47th Regiment of Foot fought Americans at Lexington and Concord and Bunker Hill and Saratoga. Now, Bunker Hill is where Rufus Putnam, the founder of the Ohio Company, um, that's where he became very well known to George Washington by his skills in hiding some cannons to bring in. So, make a long story short, and so we fought the 47th Regiment beginning from the very beginning of the Revolution. Now, Boston, there was a tavern where Americans met and where the 47th Regiment of Foot met, and it was called the Bunch of Grapes Tavern. Now, what's famous about this tavern mostly is that it was the first Masonic lodge in America, right? So, let's see. I'm going to read this here about Rufus Putnam here in just a second, but we're going to, you see, so George Washington, I'll read some names here that was on my list here. Paul Revere, Henry Craig, John Stark, Rufus Putnam, Benjamin Tupper, Parson and Cutler, people from the that eventually founded the Ohio Company. They all met here at the Bunch of Grapes Tavern right there in Boston. All right. So before the siege of Boston, the 47th Regiment of Foot would meet at the Bunch of Grapes Tavern in Boston. All right. So now we're going to do a change to show that now we're not with the 47th, we're fighting against them. And it turns out that the founders of the Declaration of Independence met at the same tavern, and later on, the founders of the Ohio Company met at the same tavern, okay, the Bunch of Grapes Tavern in Boston to found the Ohio Company. Well, they met in 1776 and turned on the 47th Regiment of Foot. Now, they've already been attacking them. They're going to make Masonically, they're going to make it known that they're attacking them by creating July 4th, okay, the 7th month, 4th day, or the 4th of July, 4-7. So now we're fighting the Regiment of Foot through the number 4-7 symbolically as well. So that's why you have the Declaration of Independence, in my opinion, on the 4th of July. Okay, 4-7. Now, and of course, July is the 7th month. That's where I get the 7 from. Okay, so now we're fighting the 47th Regiment of Foot at all these famous places. All right, and it's shortly after we get the Declaration of Independence on July 4th. Now, afterward, in 1788, okay, you have Rufus Putnam and the founders of Ohio meeting to form the Ohio Company of Associates. Now here, that's where I'm going to read from this book right here from you, The Life of Rufus Putnam, a little bit about this. This is actually for sale at the Campus Martius Museum, but if you buy it there, you're going to spend a fortune. You can buy it online like I did for about a third the price, okay? Now, General Benjamin Tupper, who had been employed by the government to assist in the survey of the territory bordering on the Ohio, agreed with General Putnam in regard to the desirableness of the country along the Ohio and Muskingum rivers as a place in which to begin a settlement, and united with them in January 1786 in issuing a call to those who, in eastern Massachusetts, were interested in the enterprise to get together and elect delegates who should meet at the Bunch of Grapes Tavern in Boston, March 1st, 1786. The same place where Washington and all of the founders of the Declaration of Independence met, and where the 47th Regiment of Foot met. Isn't that fascinating? So we've got the same place where they're founding both things, the Declaration of Independence, and they're also fighting Now they're fighting the 47th Regiment and calling for the 40 or for the fight against the 47th Regiment by symbolically through the 4th of July, 4-7. Now, this also gets even also is interesting. So, like I said, it was the first Masonic lodge, the Bunch of Grapes Tavern in Boston, and now Rufus Putnam, who had between these two times become a Mason, now wants to spread out to Ohio. He forms the Ohio Company of Associates, beginning originally at that same tavern. And what does he do? He picks 47 men. Later, they'll call it the original 48 because a man named um, Cutler, Ephraim, yeah, I think it was Ephraim Cutler. Ephraim, was it Manasseh Cutler or Ephraim? I forget. But one more guy that I said in the last video when I read his name showed up 5 days later. So originally it was 47 men who were chosen, and they went down the Ohio River and founded the very first settlement in Ohio on which day? A mirror of July 4th, April, the 4th month, on the 7th day, 4-7. So this is the leaders of your country using the same symbolism, and then they founded the first lodge in the Northwest Territory, just like they'd come out of the Grapes, a bunch of Grapes Tavern in Boston. They created the first lodge in the Northwest Territory right there in Marietta, right beside Rufus Putnam's house, right there in that the Campus Martius area that I lead on tour there, and I show you the model of the Campus Martius, which means the field of Mars, where they settled. So they had the first Masonic lodge right there next to Putnam, right there in the first settlement of Ohio, stemming from the Bunch of Grapes Tavern, where the first lodge in America was, in Boston. So now what's interesting about that 47 is when I took them around in that, you can go back and see this, but here, I'll just show it to you again, because right here in the museum is the very sword that George Washington gave to Rufus Putnam. Now think about how valuable that is. And it was given to him by a Masonic lodge, and it's next to a display of Masonic um, regalia, including George Washington's Masonic apron, which I showed you in the last video, but I didn't take a picture of it, I don't think, so I didn't add it on here. But if you just look at that last video, you can see George Washington's very Masonic apron. And right next to it, now I'm going to share a different screen here. Let's see, share screen. Sometimes it takes me just a minute to figure out how to do it. So give me just 1 second. Right there next to his, let's see, right here. Okay, now you should be able to see it, I believe. Share, or now you should be able to, I think. There we go. So right next to his apron was this symbol, a symbol related to the Pythagorean theorem called the 47th problem of Euclid. So you understand that now the 47th regiment of foot is also probably being named by something in Masonry to begin with, and that's probably why they met at the Bunch of Grapes Tavern in Boston. And so, and all that is the 47th problem of Euclid is just another name for the Pythagorean theorem. You know, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. We all learned about that. And isn't it fascinating that Rufus Putnam himself with Manasseh Cutler, or Ephraim Cutler, one of the two, maybe I'm getting the name mixed up. But anyway, they said they preserve the mounds in Marietta that I talk about, in which I show you an example of the Pythagorean theorem when I went out and measured the mounds. Okay. And what I found was, oh, it's a 108 by 108 leg and height equals a 153 hypotenuse. You can go back through my last few videos and see that. So we'll go back to stop sharing, and we'll go back to here. Okay. So how fascinating and how small our history is. When I go out and I touch that house that Rufus Putnam built, it's still there on the very same foundation since 1788. Okay, basically, the not counting the squatters and not counting the fort, is the first civilian permanent occupation in the Northwest Territory. And it puts you so close to history. It's like you just feel like you're right there. It's like, man, so it's little time has progressed from the foundation of this country to modern times. And an interesting thing about Rufus Putnam is that his father married into the Fuller family, which is right here in this book as well. It's also around the museum. Okay. I think it's probably the first page where they talk about where he gets married, or where his father got married to. Anyway, I saw it a little bit ago. Just take my word for it. So he married the Fuller family. Well, what's interesting about the Fuller family is, if you've listened to Hugh, he talks about how he's from the famous Fuller and Harris families, okay, through his mother's side. So the Fuller family in the 1800s was the same family, and I've actually verified this in other literature, so this is definitely fact. This is the same Fuller family that is related to Sarah Margaret Fuller O'Sally, who was the literary critic for Edgar Allan Poe. Now, Hugh already knew this from his mother, who had told him this before I ever found the connections to Rufus Putnam. In fact, even though Hugh had gone to school with the Putnam family and the Lincoln family, did not know that at the time that he was related to the Putnam family through Fuller and through Rufus Putnam's mother. So it all makes sense. So you have this very famous family already starting women's abolitionist movement, and Hugh's mother told him that his relatives had been in the abolitionist movement. So this just verifies more of the, not abolitionists, I'm sorry, abolitionists too, but I was trying to say women's rights, but both are true. So they were abolitionists, also close to the Unitarian Church, which is very, very interesting, because I think Sarah Margaret Fuller O'Sally, she at least attended Transcendentalist and Universalist churches. The same family, Putnam's descendants also married into the Waldo family. Now, when they tore down the mounds in Marietta, some of them are still there, but when they tore down some of the mounds, they used the clay, and they built the bricks to the Universalist Unitarian Church in Marietta, Ohio. All right. And Ralph Waldo, there's Waldo again, Emerson, used to preach at that church, or at least, preach, not like regularly, but he visited there and preached there. And the Fuller family was into that Transcendentalist back in the 1830s or 40s, the same movement. Now, isn't it interesting how Hugh talks about how right after he passed actor Robin Williams' house, that 5 minutes later, Robin Williams was killed. Then Hugh goes home, and he hears the Waldo family screaming, goes in and realizes one of them is dead. And the other one, I think, survived, if I remember Hugh's story right. And, he broke down the door and called the ambulance and thing. They had just been attacked. Now, right after that, like the next day almost, like real soon after that, they renamed the Robin Williams Bridge the Waldo Tunnel in San Francisco. And that's not a coincidence. They did this at the same time. They planned these attacks on purpose as they're following Hugh around the country. Now, why would they do that? Well, that's because Hugh's family really is the family of presidents, just like we've been saying. All right. And his descendants could be presidents, so they watch him very carefully. So those that are robbing from him, including the current member of President of the United States, those who killed Kennedy, and all of them since, who have fought to steal the wealth of the United States, You think about this. This happened right after World War II, right after they killed uh, Patton. Hugh says he was definitely murdered, and his uncle Robert Byrd, Hugh's uncle Robert, not Robert Byrd, Admiral Byrd. Thinking of the senator here in West Virginia, but um, so Admiral Byrd, they killed both of these guys, and they began to take over the country. Killed the president too. Same people, Osborne, his rapist. As part of the story, and then began to steal the wealth of the United States as Great Britain owed the United States for World War II, which they just finished paying off the loan for last year. So you think the Queen, after thousands of years of history, just let that go? No, they've been fighting for that wealth to get it back. Okay. And they've manipulated and taken over the government of the United States to this day. Everybody thinks, well, England is a puppet of the United States. It's really the other way around. They're light years ahead of us. Remember who actually started the banks? Okay, we may be instrumental in housing the Federal Reserve. However, who started it? The original reserve banks to begin with. Okay, I mean, think about the Bank of England was long before the Bank of America, and this is why people like Hugh's family, Jackson, so opposed the Bank of America to begin with, which led to the Federal Reserve. Okay. Now, and that has to do with also with the Wizard of Oz and why they put Hugh in Margaret Hamilton's class, first grade class, the very person who played the Wicked Witch on the Wizard of Oz, because the Wizard of Oz was all about the Federal Reserve originally and the gold standard. So you see how much history is really in this. Now, Rufus Putnam, his cousin Israel Putnam, was his ancestor, not very many generations back, because we're only talking about like 60 years before his birth or so, was the chief accuser and Putnam in the Salem witch trials. Yeah, that Putnam family founded Ohio, right? Through Israel Putnam's cousin Rufus Putnam. Now think about this: Israel Putnam's descendant runs or created the house called the Anchorage, a big mansion in Marietta that I went to a couple weeks ago, and I've talked about in my previous videos, which they now claim is haunted. And when I turned on my Ghost app, I found some very interesting results. Gee, could it be related to the witch trials? Could it be related to Fuller, who was Edgar Allan Poe's literary critic? Edgar Allan Poe wrote, scary sort of literature, right? Could it be the fact that he was related, probably, or Stephen King may not admit this, but Hugh says he's at least seen Stephen King at his family gatherings when he was younger. So it's probably related as well, right? Think about that. That's a lot of horror genre, isn't it? Going in through here. So this same Fuller family is also the family that created the patents on milk trucks, created the patents on vans, created the geodesic dome through Buckminster Fuller. Okay, it's the same family. So now they're not only writers and publishers, like along with Harris. So they had writers, and then the Harris side were the publishers that owned all the magazines in the country. Time Magazine and Life and all those. Up until the computer was created, and they saw the writing on the wall and sold out the print for computers, and that's why Cook married into Hugh's family through Westhouse and stole more or less in order to steal and gain computer information, as Jeff Fugate at Hugh's wedding was giving computer information to Bill Gates to make his first computers. So, wow. So you've got the print industry replaced later by the computer industry, and you have horror. And this goes way back in van patents. What a bunch of very famous, powerful people. And then when you look and you see people that are replacing them, oh, they're publishers and competitors like Cheney. Hmm. So look up the Cheney family and how he was with the same. I'm having trouble thinking of his name, but the publisher that helped create the uh, the propaganda to get Roosevelt and others to invade Cuba during the Spanish American War. Hearst, there we go. So he's married into that family all the way back to the 1800s. Hmm. And then you keep looking and you find names like Walker in there too. So you have Hugh's competitors and German families like George Bush. Bush and Walker were the same family, right? George Herbert Walker Bush. And you see after World War II, them rising to prominence in America and pushing out the families that replaced it. Remember, the Queen herself is German now, right? So you have those German families now after World War II who pretty much run and own and operate and sabotage all of America and are currently stealing her wealth, which is why America's $30 trillion in debt and we're getting stuck with the inflation and $10 boxes of cheese. And that's no joke. I actually just went the other day to to Kroger, and you know those little Velveeta cheese boxes. Don't even think about buying the name brand. It's like $16 now or something like that. But the generic for most of my life has been $2.50 or $3 right there at Kroger's. And then I go the other day and almost overnight it's now $7.50. It's almost tripled. I mean, that's a lot of wealth they stole from you while pretending to give you stimulus checks. And it started under not a Democrat. No, it started under George Bush, who gave us that first $300 check. So, do you think that the plague, the recent plague, is probably part of that design to inflate your currency to steal more wealth from you? Yes. Yes, I think that was all part of the plan, most likely. So fascinating how so much of this history comes together. It's crystal clear. And it starts with the number 47. Well, Hugh was born, guess when? The 4th of July, 4-7. So his family, who was special forces in World War II, his father was special forces in World War II, probably have something to do with how this setup came to be in our current system and was probably a part of why he was attacked and replaced by the Germans. And his family was attacked because they won World War II with Patton and with Admiral Byrd, who were both killed. So you can see they're already being attacked. Now, it's not a coincidence that the Fuller family was attacked a generation before Hugh Squier was born on Clinton River Road. As you now have the Clintons running uranium. Think about the Clinton Works in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. You know, that's not a coincidence, right? And they're selling uranium through Uranium One. Now, Trump thinks he can do the same thing, and he's not going to get away with it. But where did he learn it? You know, Trump's probably even doing worse. I think he's trying to sell the nuclear secrets themselves for how to build the things. The Clintons just sell uranium directly, right? But they don't give you the technology for how to uh, centrifuge out the purified uranium, right? And my dad works at the uranium enrichment plant most of his life. Isn't that interesting too? So, so you have the Clintons attacking the Fuller family a generation before he was born, killing his grandmother Fuller and some of her kids as they were leaving church in semis and again at their house, both times by semis, running over them in their own driveways and at the church driveway. So you can see how interwoven this history is. That I'm definitely not making this up. Hugh's definitely not making this stuff up. That is, family history is quite verifiable, just as his mother told him. And that the history of America is not that long. I can go and touch Rufus Putnam's house to this day. Really think about how recent all this is. Still on the foundation from 1788. So here's Hugh, born on July 4th, just like the 47th Regiment of Foot that we were fighting with before the Revolution and before the Declaration of Independence, before Concord and Lexington, and then turned against and were fighting at, at Bunker Hill and Concord and all these places, right? So we're fighting the 47th Regiment of Foot. We create the Declaration of Independence on July 4. Now, generations later, in the after World War II that helped establish the nation of Israel, you end up with Hugh Squier, born on July 4th, not by accident, not by coincidence, okay? I don't know if Dr. Barker, the same as Dr. Barker, was from Price is Right, or same name, right? Probably the same family, right? The Barker family was Hugh's doctor that delivered him. Maybe he did something to his mother to make her have the baby at just the right time. I don't know, okay? Because you think about this, the Barkers, Maul Barker and all them, that's the same family, okay, that were fighting the government. But they are made out to be the bad guys today because they killed Osborne. Oh, and look at that. Who was Hugh's rapist was the Osborne family. So much history here. It's hard to unpack every last little detail. But this goes all the way, so this goes back again to only half, not even half the time as far back as we're talking about Rufus Putnam, into the 1920s and 30s. And we're talking about Prohibition and the gangsters of that era through the Barkers having a feud with Oswald and the police. Or Osborne, rather. Sorry. And it was Osborne that killed Kennedy and set up Oswald. Isn't that interesting? And Osborne was the governor of Michigan. Osborne was the governor of Kansas. Interesting. Not long before the Wizard of Oz books were first made. So not a coincidence at all. So you have Osborne, who was raping Hugh while being handed over to Osborne by the actress who played the Wicked Witch, Margaret Hamilton, on The Wizard of Oz. The very actual actress was his first grade teacher. All this takes immense planning. So this is not the Illuminati. No, because who are they attacking? They're attacking the founders. So it's not the Illuminati doing it. You need to turn this stuff on its head, because that's what they've done. They've obscured history through people like Alex Jones. And Alex Jones himself exists because when Hugh's wife Victoria was murdered, Alex Jones lived beside him. Alex Jones III lived beside him and refused to print an obituary in the Greenville Sun. And not long after that, you end up with InfoWars and Alex Jones rising to prominence and making up all sorts of baloney. All these people exist to hide the truth, to tell you that the Illuminati did 9/11. And the Illuminati didn't do 9/11. The Illuminati, if you will, if there is such a thing, they always tie to the Masons. And who were the Masons? Oh, George Washington, Rufus Putnam, the founders of your country that gave you freedom and the Constitution. Now, do you think you have more rights as that family's been attacked, or do you have less rights now? No, you have fewer rights. You've been attacked, and your Constitution has been attacked from England, from Israel, from the German families in our own country that lost World War II. Isn't it interesting that the Queen Elizabeth married an SS guard? And she's German. And do you think the Germans lost World War II, or was their thinking deeper than any of us know? Maybe everything that happened. Did you ever see Hitler's body? Nobody ever did they? Did you ever see bin Laden's body? No, you never did. Think there's a reason for that? All the same people doing the same things, aren't they? If you remember, what Hugh always teaches us is that Bush ran the factories in Greenville, Tennessee, that clothed Hitler's troops before World War II. And that's why Hitler's limousine was in Greenville, not South Carolina, Greenville, Tennessee. Yeah, you think they might have been friends? You think George Bush might have actually been a Nazi? And here, because we've chosen to ignore Hugh's history and Hugh's family that's been attacked, as we lose our rights and we lose our freedom, I voted for George Bush. I didn't know better, right? So I'm glad to know and understand this history. Believe it or not, Hugh Squier was actually asked to run as vice president by an independent candidate. He disinclined the offer. He doesn't want to be president because they've been attacking his wives. They've been attacking his family all these generations, and he doesn't want the job. Now, if anybody's probably more qualified for the job than anybody, it'd probably be him. I mean, think about the people that we have today. Here, I'm going to make, this is satire, what I'm going to have to read, but I made a satirical post on Facebook, okay? So understand that is meant to be a little bit satirical, but it's kind of true too. It's based in a lot of truth. So this is the kind of nonsense that we're dealing with today, okay? So here's my post. When Biden starts a war with China, how do you suppose he will defend us? Will he pay them off by pushing enough poop and giving rainbow-colored hemorrhoids to Chinese leaders? Will he pay them off in crack? Or will he pay them in illegal immigrant children from Mexico as they sit around stroking the hair on their legs? Do you suppose that Biden will remember how to pronounce Xi? Or even his own name long enough to conduct the peace treaty meeting? Will Kamala know what country she's in while she's there? Will Pelosi be permitted to get insider stock tips at the meeting to give to her husband? Can she stay sober long enough to get the tips anyway? All these are important questions in today's America. Do you suppose that China is impressed that Peter Buttigieg runs a highway into his South Bend Inn with his chaste husband at the Oval Office? Can Trump avoid committing suicide in his prison cell long enough to run against them? Perhaps he can organize the meeting at his new business, Disney World. Yeah, Trump owns Disney World now, or is running it. Perhaps he can organize the meeting at his new business, Disney World, for them instead, where plenty of good-smelling kids walk around scented like cotton candy for them to sniff. I bet their mutual friend Epstein never thought of that. I heard the Virgin Islands has a vacancy now. Do you suppose Xi can be persuaded to accept that in exchange for Taiwan? It's obvious that we need a real man back in the White House, but where is Michelle Obama nowadays? So that was intentional satire, folks, okay? But there's a lot of truth in that. Way too much truth. I mean, Biden is playing with fire, about to start World War III. And this is why I know Hugh's not going to run for president. Okay, I understand that. Almost 70 years old, for heaven's sakes. But we need his truth to be the next president, not hiding his truth. We need his story to be told and this history to be told in order to restore our country. We've lost a lot. There are now checkpoints to getting in and out of California nowadays, where you have to show your ID and be inspected for drugs in your car along different interstates and routes in and around California. It has become worse than a communist country in some ways. And at some point, we're not going to be able to buy food. And they've already taken health care from us through Obama. So now you can't afford health care and dared to call it the Affordable Health Care Act, and it costs you, for a family of five with co-pays and uh, all that, it's going to cost you like $15,000 a year. So it's like buying a car every year. We've lost a lot of freedom, and they're sticking to us. They're sticking it to us with this inflation. They tell you where you plant your flowers, how tall, when you can cut your grass, and you have to pay taxes on your property for the rest of your life. I have some relatives looking for a property now for a $300,000 house that I said, why would you buy this house? You would have to pay $450 at least per month, every month. That's almost as much as my mortgage just for the property tax. So we need the truth, okay? We need something to be done. When is the last time a senator or a president ever stood up and said, you know what we need to do? We need to completely abolish the income tax. It should not exist. Oh, when did it start existing? Oh, as they were sinking the Titanic after they decided they were going to ignore Hughes family Jackson, create a Bank of America, which led to the Federal Reserve. As they were creating the book about the about the gold standard, the Wizard of Oz, and then using it as the symbol of the homosexual movement in America, calling them the Friends of Dorothy. Just why sometimes you'll see me use that phrase against them. I always say I'm no friend of Dorothy. And then through Woodrow Wilson, there you go. You end up with Federal Reserve and with income tax as they're sinking the Titanic, and everybody that could stop it is on board the Titanic. Isn't that interesting? All the billionaires that didn't want the Federal Reserve and the income tax, oh, down they go. Oh, on April 15th, tax day. And it's just a coincidence, right? Just a coincidence. Like when Abraham Lincoln was killed, it's just a coincidence, right? April 15th. So this planning has not been half done. It's been very methodically thought out for a century and a half. They've been attacking Hughes family. And they've got a lot of power now, especially since they murdered Kennedy. So what's left? Not much. If we're going to bring back freedom, it'll be a restoration or a revival or, dare I say it, the other R word. Oh, we had a war like that named that 200 years ago. I'm not for war. I'm not for starting wars. Right now, you have enough power if you'll use it and defend the truth. When you see people that have been murdered, like Hugh's wives, you need to defend them, because that is getting to the core of the truth of who murdered Kennedy and who stole your wealth and who took over your country. And if you can't do that, if you just play politics with the left or right, you're gonna continue to be their pawn. They're going to continue to use you until there's nothing left. So will they keep going until there's no schools left because they can't fund them? They're already having a hard time finding teachers. George Bush is now heavily invested in water, as half of the country is experiencing drought and most of the world is on fire. Gee, you think maybe they're doing anything they can possibly do to try to make the droughts worse? Instead of storing water when they have rain, instead of diverting it to Lake Mead, they're just letting it run to the ocean. Why? Because he doesn't care about you. He's going to steal your wealth. So millions of people died. They did in World War II, right? There's your German Nazi attitude right there. I'm ashamed I ever voted for the guy. I really am. I wish I'd have known then what I know now. But we're going to keep voting for the Trumps and this guy selling nuclear secrets, how to build, how to purify uranium through centrifuges. He was planning to sell that. That's why he had that information. A guy who literally put the nuclear football under siege to win an election. He's not a good guy. These are mafias fighting each other. These are criminals. Our country has now degenerated to a narco state where drugs run insanely wild and are operated by the police and the Senate and the president. Gee, is it just coincidence that Obama and Hunter Biden both did crack? Huh, just a coincidence, right? Hmm. Oh, and you had Fast and Furious from Obama in Mexico. Just like in Kennedy's day, the drugs weren't really coming from Cuba. That's disinformation and lies. Oh no, they were coming through Mexico, from and through Mexico, and from China. Oh, look at that. Now who's your friends? Anybody except your historical allies like Russia, who've been around since, geez, the revolution. And only after they killed Kennedy could they give you a fake Cold War. Only after they killed Admiral Byrd, only in 57, the same day that Hugh was raped by Osborne, only then could they give you a fake Cold War to try to chase away your enemy. And now you think because they ended the Cold War that they lost? No, 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 no. Now they've chased them over to China. That was all part of this crazy planning that they've got going on. So that you would think, oh, hey, we're on the right side. The presidents you've been elected are pro America as they chase away your biggest ally in the world and play dangerous games that might possibly end up with New York City going up in a fireball. Do you understand that? How important it is that we finally get back to the truth. And to do that, you've got to be a good person. And to be a good person, you're going to have to, when you see somebody that has been unjustly accused, unjustly convicted, unjustly murdered, go and defend those people because the truth is probably in that somewhere. And you should have a natural inclination that makes you to want to do that. And if you don't, you run away when you hear that somebody was killed, you are the reason this is happening to your country. And nobody likes to hear that, but it's true. So if you want America to have a restoration, then defend the falsely accused, defend the falsely the those murdered in order to cover up truth for the government. So our problems, just like the national debt, are inflating. The narco state has now become out of control. Right here in a small town where I am, I go down the street and you see just tons of drug addicts everywhere. And people obviously out there selling drugs, you know. Now maybe I'm a mean person. Maybe if I had that glove that Thanos had on Avengers and I could just snap my fingers and make certain people disappear. I wonder how some of us would use that. I mean, I see people every day. I'm just thinking, dang, wish I had that snap. Now, that's not to say that I'm pro abortion or anything like that, because why would you want to kill an innocent baby that hasn't done anything, especially your own flesh and blood? It's your responsibility to raise right. And this is different. These are people that are doing something wrong, right? Of course, I'd have to know they were actually doing it first, right? I'll give you that. But I can just think of a lot of people. But we don't have a magic glove from Thanos. All we have is the hope of America's founders that a moral people will come back and defend the defenseless and fight for what they know is right. That's all we have. That's why I'll never monetize this channel. All right? Not in this for the money, because I feel like truth is far more valuable than any amount of money. And until all of us, or a large percentage of us, begin to feel that way, the problems will just continue to inflate until there's ultimately nothing recognizable left. What little remnants of freedom you have here and there, and there's not very much, it's going to go away because they're gunning for it now. They're coming for those freedoms. What few you have left. Because now for 60 years, and even before that, for the last 150 years, we've said and done nothing. We should have stood up in mass and said no to the income tax. We should have stood up in mega masses and said absolutely no to the creation of the Federal Reserve. We should have told them, no, you can't directly elect senators so that states have no vote in the federal government. Now it is not a federal government at all because the states have no voice in the federal government anymore. These should have been huge issues that our grandfathers should have stood up for, but they're gone now. And the seeds that they planted where they didn't stand up have now ballooned and grown massively, took a huge expanse during the murder of Kennedy as those murderers and those people schemed and took over your government. They've been acting for 100 years before that, just like we've talked about in the past with Hughes family Harris at Ford's Theater. Okay, but they really got it going in the 60s, and now you've got it. They just printed you're $30 trillion in debt because to pay for some debt you have to print more debt because you don't have money. You live in a state of bankruptcy, so the only thing you can do is create more Federal Reserve notes, more debt notes, and create more debt for that money to even exist to pay off the previous. So there's no choice under a system of bankruptcy like that but to inflate that bubble for all of eternity. So you think 30 trillion is a lot. Wait till it's 200 trillion. Wait till it's 500 trillion. And it will be in our lifetime if we don't start standing up together and saying we will defend those who have been attacked, starting with the families of Hugh Squier, all the way back to at least the 1860s. And all those that we've talked about since. Defend his murdered wives. You got to do this. You have to see that when women are killed on holidays, that there's a reason that this is happening. And in the process, they set it all up in such an obvious way from the White House that you know that the federal government is behind it. You need to stand up and say, enough is enough. We're not going to allow the federal government to attack private citizens. But if we don't do that, whatever's left is going to collapse. Whatever little tiny bits of freedom that you have will be gone soon. If something far worse doesn't happen first, and you end up with a mushroom cloud destroying multiple cities across this country because of the constant push. And now those families that killed Kennedy have now, by design, pushed Russia into the hands of China and made your ally, your biggest ally in the world, your enemy. As they constantly fight to try to scheme for more money as Pelosi goes to Taiwan for stock tips, for her husband, to get more millions of dollars from insider trading because they're all just part of the scam, just drunkards, part of the scam. And because all they've ever cared about is money, which is just about everybody in our country now, then there's no hope for finding a revival of, and I'm going to talk about a religious church revival like we talked about in Sunday school. I'm talking about a revival of people caring about the innocent. Isn't that interesting that there's revivals all across this country that are religious revivals, and they never talk about these things I'm talking about right now? They never mention the names of the murdered wives. They never mention the names of the kids that are being transported for bad purposes by Biden and by George Bush and by Obama and by Trump across the border to be trafficked and murdered. Nobody's mentioning names like this, are they? Nobody's mentioning the names of the people that are killed and who did it. And nobody's saying, let's raise money for lawyers to fight these people in court. We don't have to have a revolution if you use what voice you have and what money you have and start using your voice. If pastors would actually start to be what they're supposed to be, what the idea is, the real idea, or at least what it should be, if they actually stood up and defended the defenseless, we wouldn't be having this problem. But there's not a pastor in the country that does it. Not a one. Not a one's told you what I just told you. Not a one has become a historian and said, hey, they murdered Hugh's wives on holidays. Let's go and what's going on here? This this history goes way back. Let's do some research. You got a tour guide at a museum now telling you truth, right? That's really looking into history as much as possible to tell you real truth. And I'm going to continue to learn. I'm going to continue to try to expand my knowledge so that I can give you real truth, as much of it as possible. But start listening, start caring enough, start caring about your own country and the future of your own children enough to, when innocent people are attacked, you defend them. And quit running away. When you hear the word pedophile, fight back. Don't run away. So I guess that's pretty much been about an hour. Some real good history lessons in this video. And if you'll take the time to go through the video slowly, rewind, pause, write down little notes. What did he say? Rewind, write down. I do this in videos all day long, folks. This is how I take voice recordings of Hugh and other people. Even when I do tour guides, I listen to other tour guides. And I listen to them. Record what they say, and I listen. I write it down. This is how you learn stuff, right? Until you take the history of your country like this, because you're not going to get this from Fox News. So you're going to have to treat when you finally get real information like you're in a college course. So you're going to have to take it upon yourself to do your homework. And homework involves work. It's work home. You have to actually write this stuff down. You got to exercise your mental muscles. You got to say, wait, where can I read about that? And begin a process of restoring your knowledge of history. That's until you have knowledge, you can't have true repentance. Repentance in the Bible is actually based on the word knowledge. Is actually based on gnosis, right? Knowledge, metanoia, with knowledge. So if you want to have a revival in your country, a repentance in your country, so to speak, you're going to have to gain knowledge of the history of your country. All the revivals in the world are meaningless if you don't take it to the next step after you leave the building and do the work of understanding history and of defending the defenseless. Isn't that really what Jesus said? Didn't Jesus say you're supposed to defend the defenseless? Care about the least of these? Suffer the little children to come unto me? But there's not one. There's not one in this country that's doing it yet. Not a single one. So when you hear something like Hugh Squier's wives were murdered on holidays, find out why. And do your research and do the history. Ask the questions. Feel free to ask me legitimate, honest questions that you mean from your heart, not questions that you're just trying to, I don't know, throw a monkey wrench in the works or something. No. Don't play games with me like that. Care enough about your country that you want to know the truth for yourself. Okay? Because I'll just shut you off without a response if you do that to me. I'm not interested in playing games. I'm not gonna fight and debate people anymore. I used to do that a lot. Callie used to like to debate people. Now I just like the Masonic Lodge. They put their building up there, and if you want to learn, you have to go to them and knock on their door. Otherwise, they're not going to solicit you. And I'm saying my truth right here. If you have an honest question, come knock on my door. I'll do my best to give you the answers that best answer I possibly can. And I think you will do the same. Ask, ask honest questions, seek honest answers, and learn the truth and defend the defenseless. And that's 1 hour. Peace.